You work in Google. That's a big deal. So how is it to be a part of a company like Google?
It's a wonderful privilege. I mean, it never gets old. If you're curious and willing to learn and you want to have an impact, you can get the opportunity to do very different things in your career.
And working in some of the best countries across the world, Australia, UK, and now in the US, some of the best companies, right? Sounds like a dream resume.
It's been a really fun journey. The culture change was big. I was the only Indian kid. We were in a little town. I was the only non-white kid.
Parents definitely have a huge influence on the kids, don't they, right? And in this case, your dad said something like this. And how much of that influenced you to dream big? Welcome to Your Career, Your Rules, period. The podcast where we explore bold moves, inspiring detours, and careers built on clarity and courage. Today's guest is someone who has truly lived the global dream. Born in the vibrant landscapes of Australia, schooled in South Bangalore's most sought out school, Kumurans, and earned her degree from the prestigious Wharton School in the US, and built a stellar career across three powerhouse countries, Australia, the UK, and the US. She has worked with giants like EY, GSK, Bain, and for the last 12 years, she has been working at Google trying to make our lives better through enhanced user experience. And yes, she also happens to be my batchmate at school. It's a proud, full circle moment to bring her on this podcast. Join me in welcoming the brilliant, insightful, and incredibly inspiring Priya Anant as we uncover the mindset and moves behind her journey. Hello, Priya. How are you?
Good. How are you, Shashikant?
Awesome. I'm good. Firstly, thank you so much for taking some time today. I know
Of
it's been
course.
a long day for you and it's slightly late in the evening there in the Bay Area. So, thank you. Thank you for making it.
Of course. No, it's exciting to be here and it's good to reconnect after so long.
Yeah, so I must confess that, frankly, we never spoke in school. Uh,
No, no, I don't think so.
I I always knew that there was Priya Anant, the Priya Anant, always
Oh,
everybody in
goodness.
school knew about you, but I'm 100% sure that you didn't know that I existed.
Oh, no, I don't think that's true. Like, that's not true. But I don't think we spoke, though, either.
Cool, cool. Cool. So how is life? Let's start with that. What's happening?
Life is good. It's very full at this moment. I have two kids, 14 and almost the 13 and almost 15 actually. And work is busy, and so yeah, life is really full. It's that stage of life where everything is happening all at once.
Yeah. Talk to us about it. How does your day look like? How does your week look like? Where are you working? What are you doing?
So my week days are usually they start pretty early, earlier than the rest of my family, because that's the only time, the quiet time that I get, where I tend to get up, have a little, quiet, have my tea, go out for my walk. I do walk a lot every day, so I try to pace that between different times of the day. But the early morning is important for me to get out. And then my kids, my younger one especially, still needs a lot of support getting out of the house in the morning. So I come back and turn into the chief shepherder. And so once they're off, that's when I head off to work as well. And work is, a full day, as you know, right? Like meeting city back to back. But I've been trying to build in a lot more, being a lot more intentional and protective of my time over the last few years. Just time to think, to learn. So much is going on around us, and that's been really good. So I feel like I'm really diving in a couple of areas. It's a very introspective, I think, part of my life right now, whether it's thinking about the kind of work I want to do or learning about new things that are happening around us, reflecting on, my kids are teens now. I have two teenagers, reflecting on the world we live in, and particularly in the US right now, and what value system, in general, your kids are absorbing, but what's happening around us. And just being this age, right? I mean, I'm no longer preoccupied with maybe, when we first migrated to this country, sort of all of those things of making it and sort of, whatever. That part is done, but it's more now around, you know what impact am I having, what's the legacy I want to leave. Google's great, it's been a privilege to be here, but what does like the next 10 years look like? And so I'm really sort of diving into those kinds of thoughts and conversations, and thinking about those aspects. So that's sort of my life. And weekends I tend to do, it's all family time and hiking, and running my kids around to various activities. At this age, I still get to drive them around, which is nice. So yeah, that's pretty much life. And we managed to fit in a couple of trips. We're going to Turkey next weekend, which is nice. We love to travel, and traveling with the kids these days is at this age is just really nice. So that's me. I'm trying to still figure it all out, but different questions than maybe 10 years ago.
Awesome, awesome. Sounds like a dream day or a dream week for anybody listening to this. I just want to tell my listeners that you work in Google, and
Yeah, yeah.
that's a big deal. So, how is it to be a part of a company like Google? It's an aspiration for so many millions of people to be a part of a company like that. How is it to be there?
It's a wonderful privilege. I mean, it never gets old. I've been here. This is now my God, 2013. So this is now my 12th year, a little over 12 years, and I've been in five different roles, each of them very, very different. And I think that's what I love about Google. If you're curious and willing to learn and you want to have an impact, you can get the opportunity to do very different things in your career, which is why I think I've stayed so long. And it's, like the last few years have been challenging in tech, and particularly for Google, as it's a big company. The spotlight's always on us, and it's evolving in new and interesting ways. But I still think, the kinds of challenges that we're dealing with AI and everything else, having a chance to be in the middle of this and absorb it and play, some kind of a role in it, it really has been, the professional highlight of my career is being in Google, and the people that I've met. I think when all is said and done, that's really what you take: the relationships, the kinds of people, the experiences over the years. It's a privilege. It doesn't get old. It doesn't get old.
Super. So what do you exactly do, Priya, in Google? Talk to us
Yeah.
about it.
At this point, I lead the user experience teams for our entire enterprise portfolio. So, user experience includes all of the user research, the design, some of the front end engineering for basically our enterprise solutions that we've built for Google and also use as a trial case for Google Cloud.
Mm.
So everything from our people ops, marketing, finance, legal, procurement, all the corporate functions, there is a whole range of enterprise solutions that we build, and then also look to export through cloud. And I run the user experience teams for that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds very interesting. So let's start right from the beginning. Okay.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the journey. So from being born in Australia,
Yeah,
right,
yeah. Born in
to
Australia.
completing
Yeah.
schooling in Bangalore, India, in
Mm-hmm.
Commerce. That's where you and I probably, that's how we both of us know each other. To
Yeah.
graduating in the US, to completing your MBA from an Ivy League college, which is Wharton, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And working in some of the best countries across the world, Australia, UK, and now in the US, some of the best companies, right? I think you
Yeah.
worked at GSK to start with, and then Bain,
Actually, Ernst and Young to begin with. That's where I
EY.
started my.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
Ernst and
EY,
Young, Unilever, then GS.
Unilever, GSK, Bain, and then now Google.
Yeah.
That sounds like a dream resume. How has it been? Talk to us about it.
It's been a really fun journey. I was born in Australia. Then my parents moved back to India when I was 6. I did until 10th grade in India, and then moved to Australia for high school and for undergrad. And I don't think I ever had a concrete vision of any of this. My dad, always said to me, like, whatever you do, he really wanted me to be a doctor, and I thought I was going to be for a while. as well. But he said, whatever you do, I want you to do really well. Be the best at whatever you do. And so anyway, I ended up going right after 10th grade to Australia to join, high school over there. And that was hard because all of the culture change was big. I was the only Indian kid. We were in a little town. I was the only non-white kid. There was me, the Indian kid, whose dad was the town doctor, and then there was my friend who was the Chinese kid whose dad owned the Chinese restaurant. I mean, how cliched can you get? But that's really what it was. And it was intimidating. I think I went from a very secure, in a culture where academic strength is really prized, right? Very, very
Right.
secure, to a culture where no one really cared. My dad had very big, and I did have very big expectations of getting into, a great course and all of that. And most of the kids in my high school, I think there were just two of us in a class of 100 that actually went to college. So you can imagine the culture change. Like most of the kids from my high school in Australia, my high school there went until 12th, their aspiration was to work in the coal mines in the town. So it was a very big culture change from Bangalore, from all of this to this little town in Australia. So that was hard. And I think I just took it a little bit in my stride. I wasn't quite sure how to navigate this, and socially it was difficult. But slowly I adjusted. I went from, while I was in Australia, actually, we ended up going. That's when I, heard about, getting sort of the first rank in India and all that. That was very surreal to me. That was not something I really sort of aimed to get. I was very much a nerd and just kind of did my work, and that was it. That was what I was good at, and that's what I did. And then in Australia or anywhere really, no one really cared. So it was really about wake up in the morning, go to
So,
school, try
sorry
and
to
figure
stop
yourself
you.
out.
Sorry to stop you. So basically, you were in the first 6 years of your life, you were in Australia, then you came back to India. You came
Yeah,
to India and you
yeah,
finished your schooling, which is the 10th standard in India, and then went back to Australia.
yeah. Went back to
That
Australia.
is that right? Okay,
Yeah,
sorry. Please
yeah.
continue.
No. So I go back to Australia at 16, which is a really tough time to change countries, right? But I was lucky. I didn't just leave the way a lot of kids do now. Like I was with my dad, and I had my family there, so that was great. So I adjusted, and then what I realized in Australia is I suddenly we were doing very different kinds of subjects, and all of a sudden things that I'd never really seen in school in India. And almost, I'm trying to remember how or why, almost overnight, I decided I wanted to try something else. I wanted to study economics and business studies, and much to my dad's, maybe despair. And that's what I did. And I really enjoyed it. And there was a part of me, I think, also that when I look back, the way math and science was taught in India was very different to how it was taught in Australia. So I found myself suddenly from like feeling pretty confident about it to being like, I don't know what they're talking about here. So maybe there was a little bit of that where I just didn't know how to deal with that unfamiliar feeling. But it was also, I was very interested in this new space. And so that's what I did.
But
And I ended up,
how was it? How was it different?
it was the math was a lot more conceptual. You really had to understand the graphical, the concepts behind, let's say, calculus. And like in India, and especially 10th grade, you just, what do you say, like learned it rote, right? Like even today I can do differential calculus without really being able to explain exactly how it works to you. So you
Hmm.
just learned it in a very different way. The science was a lot more hands-on. It felt a lot more detailed than just 10th standard in India back in those days, especially textbook start to finish, and that was pretty much it. We didn't have labs, we didn't have dissection, so all of that was a little bit like I was all of a sudden a little bit taken aback by that. So maybe there was some of that involved in the decision, but I don't know, because certainly business studies and economics and the whole social aspect of this was very difficult. But slowly I adjusted. I made some friends. I soon realized that I was and this is very different competitive environment to India, being a small town in Australia. But very soon I realized that I was also doing really well academically in these classes, so that was great. And then my teachers there took a lot of interest, the ones that, because not a lot of kids in my school in Australia really cared about academics, and so they really sort of said, you know what, like in English was a great example where I was really good in India, but not in the way in which I needed to do it in Australia. So I remember in India when we grew up, right, there was the answer that you gave for,
Correct.
it's very different now, but back then, And so that's the answer you gave, the one that you knew whoever could, whatever the right answer was. And I remember my English teacher telling me, no, no, no. Okay, she gave me back my paper and she was like, once more with feeling. Like, I really want to know, what do you think? And I
Mm.
was like, oh, you really want to know what I think? Because I don't even know what I think. Because, I've just been so used to studying for the way it was. So those were some really very sort of formative experiences where all of a sudden you're coming into your own in terms of your creativity, in terms of being able to go in and study an entire business end to end in 10th grade and write papers about it. Very different education system, which I really enjoyed. So out of high school, I had the opportunity to actually get Australia is very much into work experience. And so I applied for a job at Ernst and Young coming out of high school. And the deal was you would go work for them and they would pay your college. They pay for you to go to college. And a 3-year degree would take 4 years because you would be working for the first 2 years full time.
Okay.
So somehow I managed to get this job in spite of myself. I was painfully still very, shy and not really sure of myself, as you are at that age. But somehow I managed to get this, and off I go. I'm 18 years old. I'm working full time at Ernst and Young in this big corporate building. I've never been in this environment before, and I'm going to college at night. And the job was pretty simple in the beginning. It was working in an audit firm, and it was, literally like filing things. And slowly you got into more complex parts of the audit or the financial analysis. But it was a pretty simple job, and and when you think about it, but it was a place to start. And I learned a lot from just watching
Mm.
what people did, how they worked with clients. I was very interested. We were doing the audit of clients, but I was very interested in like, what was the business that led to these results? And I was
Right.
going to school at night. So that's how undergrad happened. And coming out of that, I could have gone back to Ernst and Young, but I ended up going to work for Unilever because I really wanted to understand how a business worked, and they had a really good management training program. So I ended up doing that for a couple of years in Australia and New Zealand. Did different rotations in finance and supply chain and marketing, and I was also earning my CA at the same time. So
Okay.
that was that journey.
CA in
And
India
after
or CA in Australia? You
the
mean
CA in Australia, yeah,
CA in Australia? And you
yeah,
graduated out of a business graduation.
yeah, business degree. So I had accounting and finance. That was my major. And so did that. Came out of finished my management training program, and I was really at a crossroads. Like I could have stayed, and I still have friends who have stayed from my management training program in Unilever. They're like C-level in Australia, which is a small market. But I, like many others, felt that if I didn't leave then, I never would. And most people, it was a very small market. The opportunities were fewer. Most people my age, my background, ended up going to the UK because we could go and overnight you would get exposure to lots of different companies and industries, and you'd get
Mm.
paid 3 times more. And it was a really nice experience to sort of go. And the way, I think what we had to do was you'd work for 3 or 4 months and then you'd travel for 3 or 4 months. That was the plan. So I end up in London, and I found this job with Glaxo. And for me at the time, I really wanted to earn some money to pay for my MBA. So by this stage, my dad and I talking about, okay, now you're going to do business, but like if you're going to do business, then you should do an MBA. And I think he wanted me to go to Harvard, which is another whole other story, because Harvard MBA is the best one, right? So or at least at the time. So I go to London with the intention to get some experience because I was still pretty young, and I wanted to have some experience when I applied to business school, the money to pay for business school as well. So I ended up spending a couple years in London. On the way to London, complete stroke of luck, I end up meeting my husband on the plane. Complete coincidence. So all of this, he's on his way. I think he was going off to the US. He was just in transit. We stayed in
Okay.
touch, da da da. So things happened along the way, and I ended up applying to. So he, again, very coincidentally, was going to start his MBA at Wharton. It
Okay.
was a and so as we got together and stuff, I thought, well, I want to apply to a few programs. Let's see what happens. And I ended up applying a year before I think I would have originally. Um, and so I applied to a bunch of schools, and I ended up going to Wharton, and that's how I moved to the U.S. after a couple of years in the UK. Went to Wharton, came out, still didn't know what I wanted to do professionally. And I thought consulting would be great because I was still very curious about different types of industries. I'd worked in, consumer goods and professional services. I'd worked in pharma, and I thought this would be a really good opportunity. And to be honest, we both of us had to take jobs that would offer visas because not most of the jobs we couldn't apply to.
Right.
So I ended up going to LEK actually for a year, and then transferred to Bain. So that was my journey. Bain was amazing. I learned so much. You have these jobs where you grow up you sort of come into your own, or a lot of what you do, you learn from mentors and from those experiences. And for me, that was Bain. And I also became a parent during that time. The last couple of years, I had my son, and Bain was great because I was able to sort of go off the field for a little bit, and then we had our daughter, and that's when I started to really think. I was about to go back, and I think I was very close to partner, but we're staying in Boston at the time, and they said you have a client in Chicago and a client in San Francisco. So I'd be gone 4 or 5 days a week. And the whole goal was to, roll the client, as they say, which is to sell a bit more work. I started to think to myself, okay, let's say I did that, and then I'd be gone even more. And so it just wasn't. I knew that I could, and I saw other folks do this as well. I knew, for me, I didn't think I could be the kind of parent I wanted to be and also be happy at Bain. Like if you're not successful, you're out. So that's not a question. You're not going to be there if you're not successful, but you can be successful and not happy, right? And I wanted to be happy, and I wanted to be the kind of parent I wanted to be. We had kids 10 years into our marriage. And so, this is really, this has always been important, but I've enjoyed every part of being a parent. And so I started to really think about, is this viable? And
Yeah.
I spoke to everyone. I spoke to the men at the firm. I spoke to the women. I spoke to alumni. I spoke to people who were in the same sort of situation as me, or were also everyone. And I think the men were the most honest, where they were like, yeah, my daughter doesn't even talk to me anymore. Or things like, you have to be really comfortable providing very well for your family, but being largely irrelevant day to day. Whereas the women were very much like, you can have it all. I have 3 nannies. And I was like, I had one nanny at the time, and even that was too much, I thought, right? So for me, it just started to feel like this isn't compatible. And now what do you do? And, I loved the job, but I didn't love the life that it was, it was more and more like leading against the wrong ladder, so to speak. So you only leave to get to leave Bain once, and so you want to do it well, right? Because it is one of those moments in your career. And I ended up finding a role in Google in Boston, which many of my Bain friends said, "Oh my God, I wouldn't take that role," and they thought that the person that it reported to wasn't quite. And, people judge people from LinkedIn profiles and what have you. Or the role at the time was coming in. The person who hired me wanted to. They had a whole customer support operation, and it was all over the place, very messy, and they wanted someone to come in and streamline that. So it didn't feel like a particularly, especially to my friends at Bain who were all like, you should be a head of strategy here, there, whatever. But I felt like what I loved about Bain was the opportunity to do really interesting work. And I sensed that at Google. The opportunities that were there, not in the current role. I saw my first role as just a project, just like a consulting project. And I knew a couple of people who had interviewed me, and one of them was a consultant from McKinsey. And so I had a very frank conversation with him about the thought process. We're still friends to this day. And I decided to make the move. And I think for me, careers have always been about, or projects or jobs have been about working with people I respect and like, and vice versa, because I think then you get more opportunities, you can take a few more chances versus the particular project or the particular industry. And so that was when I took the plunge. And it was I think it's the best move I've ever made. I wasn't expecting to have to move cross country. I think that was naive on my part. We'd lived in Boston for a decade. Both our kids were born there, and we had these friends you make, especially when you all have kids around the same time. So we had that support system. My nanny, it was great. But I soon realized within the first 2-3 weeks that this job really belonged in the Bay Area. And so if nobody told me that when I was interviewing for it, maybe just as well, because if they had told me that, I might not have gone for it. I would have to travel every other week or maybe once in 3 weeks to do it well.
Mm.
And so, the and Google at the time said we'll pay to move you, like just move. And I wasn't sure, but my husband actually was like, no, we should do this. Like this is going to be good for you. We should do this. He had to, he didn't, we thought he would have to change roles, but weirdly again, his job at the time had their office was actually on the Google campus. So again, one of those weird sort of, amazing moments. And he was very gun ho about it. He was like, "We should go. You won't get this opportunity again. Let's do this." And so I was a reluctant, but I knew I had to do this for this job, and we moved. And I've been there ever since. So I've done the roles in customer support, trust and safety, my first 5 years, and then the most recent 6 years in various product roles. So that's been my story.
Oh, awesome.
It's a
Awesome.
long journey. Yeah.
Yeah, long journey, exciting journey, a lot of things to pick up and talk about. I have so many questions buzzing in my head. I need to think where I should be starting. There's so many things that you talked about. Let's start from here. So now when you look back, right,
Mhm.
you're doing a certain role, you're at a sweet spot in your life. You've been able to manage your home, you've been able to manage your work. I also know that you love hiking and you do a lot of hiking these days. So there's a good amount of balance that you've found some across different aspects of your life. Now, when you look back and see through the journey that you have had as a 16-year-old going through the rough in Australia or later, what are those threads that stand out for you, which have made who you are today, the learnings or the small things that have made who you are today. Are there a few?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we all have that in our lives, right? I mean, if I had to say what they are for me, I think one has been I've been really fortunate to have had a very, very supportive family. Like my father, my husband, extended family, just always there. Even in my moments where I wasn't sure of myself or should we do this, I think and I think that's a one gets very lucky or not, but in my case I was lucky with these things, and having a spouse who's really supportive and sort of like, no, let's do this, or we that I think has been the foundational aspect of my life and career, and continues to be. So I feel very fortunate in meeting Sachin and having this partnership, right? So that's, I think, is a very strong thread. Even when the children were, very small, and I had really great maternity leave, that was fantastic. But he's been an equal partner throughout, and so I think that makes a big difference, particularly when you're trying to be a good parent, a good employee, and you want to get this balance. You need a partner, and I've been very fortunate to have him. I think the second thing is just learning to learn, and I'm still doing that. We're all doing that. I think just being I am a naturally curious person. Like I said, I'm a bit of a nerd, but I think that helps in many ways, and it's helped me make moves. That's why I was drawn to consulting. That's why I think I changed jobs even early in my career, because I was trying to learn different things. And I certainly find that pace of learning has only gone up. Today, after my hike, I was in like an all-day session learning how to build with AI, right? And I love it. It never gets old. But I think that's what creates opportunities. Along the way, there have been challenges, right? There have been, professional challenges, health challenges, and I think that's where you go from, when you're young. And I've had this sort of life early on where I was really good at certain things that were prized in my culture, right? I was very good at schoolwork, and back in those days, like that was a big thing. If you're good at school, you can do it. You can do no wrong, right? But when you come into the workforce, you realize that you might have been good in school, but you don't know how to do your job. And
Yeah.
you have your first manager who's literally like tearing your work apart, and you realize that you have learned nothing in your degree because you really don't know how to do anything. So, sort of learning, being able to embrace that situation and be like, okay, this is going to be okay. Like, don't freak out. Because that was one of the first few times when I thought, oh my God, I'm really, I don't know what to do. And this is an unfamiliar feeling for me. But, sticking through that, or facing, personal health issues where, there's no guaranteed outcome either way. Things happen and you've just got to show up. I think and just work through it, and you hope it works out. I think those moments give you a lot of like from confidence, it gives you a little bit more conviction in yourself,
Yeah,
because you're like, or in generally it's going to be okay, maybe not in yourself sometimes, but you, after you've been through it a few times, you realize that okay, there's no point stressing about it, even though I'm stressing right now. It's going to be okay, because all these other times that felt really difficult, it turned out okay. So we just got to hold through it, right? So I think those moments give you that perspective. So a good amount of falling on your butt is actually a good thing, I think, and very important, like for all of us. And I've certainly had my share of those. But I think it's also important to just, it can be so easy day to day, especially when the days are long, the kids were younger, or, even now, life is very full, to feel like, oh, I have to do this, or I have to go to the, actually, like, there was a moment a few years ago when I realized, no, 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 this is all of this is an amazing privilege. All of this, even our worst day, is someone else's pipe dream,
exactly.
right? And so what is that whole, like, what do you get to do in life? Even when work is difficult, I get to go to Google and show up and be part of this story, and that's huge. And I think humans, we always adjust to whatever our situation is, right? And so I think reminding myself of, just to be grateful and to notice those
You-
things,
Yeah.
helps during some of those, everybody has tough days and tough moments, and it helps during that.
Awesome. Awesome. I think you said something really powerful. You said, you know, you don't know what's going to happen, how it's going to pan out, but you just need to show. I think that's
Mhm.
really powerful. A lot of people, losing hopes and dreams because something did not work at some point in time.
Yeah.
It's all about showing up every day and just doing your best at that point in time. And things eventually, as you rightly said, will pan out well, right? I thought that was really powerful. There's another thing that you said which caught my attention. And you talked about your dad saying you should go to Harvard,
Mhm.
right? So
Mhm.
parents definitely have a huge influence on the kids, don't
Mhm.
they? Right?
Yeah.
And in this case, your dad said something like this. And how much of that influenced you to dream big? Talk to us
Oh,
about it.
it was all of it. I mean, I remember even driving. I don't know why I remember this particular road. Double road in India, in Bangalore.
Yeah, yeah.
Riding with
KH,
my dad. Yeah. And we were in the car. It was just me and him. And he was like giving me some advice. And I don't remember much of it, but he was like, your life is just beginning, and you've got to give your best, and this, that. And I was like, okay, okay. And like, that was really, I was very, he had a lot of impact on me, right? So, I would come home from school, he would be there, he would make me something. My dad's a doctor, and he had his own clinic in India, but when we moved back, but after a while, he didn't speak Kannada. So after a while, it wasn't quite his thing. So he ended up going to Australia for 3, 4 months in a year, and he would work there. Then he would come back, and that's what he did. So when he was home, he was really home. So he would look over my books, and so it was doing well was a way that I sort of learned early on. It gave my parents a lot of happiness, especially my dad. So that was sort of my way to, like, it was a very reinforcing thing, and that's a good thing. But sometimes it can be dangerous. So and later on in my life, especially as I at this stage in my life, I realized that, there's a tendency that I have. You mentioned something in the write up about being teacher's pet or whatever. There's a tendency that I noticed in myself to always needing to be the best on my team.
Got
And
it.
that is a good thing. It gets you to a certain place, but anything overused can sometimes be difficult, right? So, um, and also, like, when we're younger and we're just, life is a little more one dimensional, like it's about getting from this stage of life to the next, and this grade and this job or whatever, that may be okay. But when life is a little bit more multidimensional, like, you can't be the best mom and the best wife and the best employee and the best healthy person and the best cook and the best, you name it, all at once. It just becomes too much in your head, right? So it is, I try to remember that with my kids, because many times I get into this mode where I'm like, oh, we should do this and this and this, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm turning into my dad. And while it was a wonderful thing for me, like, I never had any limits. He He, to this day, he's 82 years old almost, and to this day he will ask me about my job. He'll come here, he'll want to know what's going on. He is my biggest champion, but at the same time, I feel like as we grow, there needs to be a sense of like, how much is enough
Yeah.
for yourself,
Yeah.
right? Where do you, and that's something that you asked me, where am I today? That's something I'm wrestling with. Like, how much of Google is enough? At what point are there other things in my life that I want to explore? And it's hard when you're very driven by these sort of Google is a wonderful place, but and it has a lot of benefits, but you're sort of like, if I walk away from that, how much of my identity is tied to that versus trying to forge something new,
Yeah.
right? So I think parents can have all kinds of impacts on kids, but also as you grow as an adult, I guess I'm learning like, oh, I have to hear my own voice too as I get older.
Right.
And so for my kids, I'm trying to kids these days though, I'm sure your kids, right? They have their own voice, and my kids have very strong voices, very different voices. So also I think now in this climate, we don't know the kinds of jobs our kids are going to have 5 years from now,
Exactly.
right? We just don't know. And so for me, it's a lot about leaning into what they are interested in and really trying to encourage that. Um, it used to be go to Harvard, or I ended up going to Wharton, but like I don't even know anymore as an Ivy League undergraduate all that it's cracked up to be. Because I actually ended up working with a lot of, so I was a graduate student from Wharton. My undergrad was in Australia, but I ended up working with a lot of undergrads from all of the Ivy League students, colleges at Bain. And, a lot of these kids were brilliant, but did not know how to take failure. So when they encountered a situation, and usually the way the team structures worked is so I came in at business school, so I would typically be working with a couple of these undergrads who were incredible academically and all very, very successful kids. But when we got into difficult situations, they just couldn't, some of them would fall apart. And so for my own kids, with everything going on, and I don't even know how education is going to evolve, I want them to love to learn and be able to explore. So my son is interested in medicine and or biology and art. Very, very different. We live in the valley, and he could not be less interested in computers or AI or any of these things, which as a mom gives me major heartburn because I'm like, that's like literacy. Uh-oh, like you need to learn. Um, but you know what? Like he went and found this amazing art and anatomy program at Stanford, which who would have thought you would even put those two together? And he applied for the summer and he got in. And so, I think just trying to hold my own fears back as a parent, because I don't even
Yeah.
know what I'm trying to protect from, honestly. When my dad told me go to Harvard, I think there was at least some longevity to that. Like
Yeah.
he knew, even though even 10 years from that piece of advice, it was still going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
If I tell my son, oh, yeah, you're interested in biology, you should definitely do medicine, I don't know that that's actually good advice for him.
Yeah.
Because for all you know, many of the medical jobs won't exist in the way they exist now, right? So I'm learning to temper my own anxiety as a mom and lean into what they love to do, and hope that again, one of those things, right? Like you don't know how it's going to turn out, but you just show up for them and you support them. And as long as they're hardworking and do the right things and are good people, it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Uh, but I just, like our parents would have had a particular path they could lay out for us, or we might have seen that for ourselves. I don't think that's true for at this point in time,
Right.
for ourselves or our kids.
Right. So, so, I mean, when we were growing up, the rate of change that was happening in the environment was far lesser than what it's happening today. So,
Yeah.
technologies are changing every year, right? The jobs are changing, the quality of jobs and the type of jobs are changing every 3 or 4 years.
Oh yeah.
And you don't know what's going to be there 10 years hence. So I think it's very important to be flexible. It's very important to go with the flow, do what you really like doing, so that even if you need to do some changes, you're happy doing it because you just like doing it. And you don't
Exactly.
end up in an area which you don't like, being in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's a great message for the parents, Priya, frankly. I think a lot of our generation who have parents who are parents of, let's say, 18-year-olds or teens are still very, very clued on to getting their sons and daughters to be engineers or doctors.
Oh yeah. Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and if I talk about India, I keep saying this. You got close to around 1.5 million people applying for engineering colleges, right? The Ivy League engineering colleges of India, which is the IITs,
Yeah.
probably the top few, like BITS and so on and so forth. So there are 1.5 million people applying for JEE every year. So imagine uh, the number of kids who are going to be disappointed every year, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Oh,
Really,
yeah.
it doesn't have to be that way. You went to a business school. You did not get into engineering or medical. Your dad wanted
Mhm.
you to be a
Yeah.
doctor. You chose to be in the business area, and that's worked out wonderfully well for you, right? So,
It's worked out great. Yeah. It's worked out really great. And I didn't have a plan or anything. I just tried to make the best move I could at every stage, right?
yeah,
And it worked out. And I really have to give kudos to my dad for like holding himself together, because he really had his, I'm an only child, and he really had his heart set on me being a doctor. I had the marks to do it, but I didn't. And he never, he did express a little bit of like, oh, I hope you know what you're doing. But very quickly it turned into, okay, if this is your decision, then he didn't want that typical like commerce student goofing off. Like he was like, if this is your decision, that's fine, but I want you to do the best you can at this, right? So his version of that was, you need to go to Harvard. So I think that was rare for like, I remember people even saying, oh my God, is she okay? What happened? Why would she enroll in commerce? And I mean, maybe being away, I didn't have to address too much of that. If I had done this in India, it would have been a different story. And I probably wouldn't have done it in India, to be honest, because I wouldn't have been that exposed to it.
yeah,
But it worked out. It worked out. And I think, you know, for all of us right now, I think we just need to have that faith with our kids as well that it will work out.
yeah,
And
I-
even for our own careers, right? Like many of us are in transition points. I don't think what I do today at Google, I run a large team and there's a lot of work associated with leading that team, managing that team. I don't think that will exist 5 to 10 years from now.
yeah,
And so, what does that mean for me or people like me? And where should we be retooling? Or, I think it's a good question to ask when you're still in the comfort of your current roles and titles and all of that. It's a good question to ask because I think it's very easy to get caught up in the day to day.
mm,
And then one day, uh, none of us are immune. And the pace of change that you mentioned, right? It's so fast that it can catch you
yeah,
unawares. And I think there's a lot of that happening in the Valley right now. And I feel like our generation, which saw so much of the software, computer engineering boom, is now seeing sort of this weird shift away from everything that brought us to this point, right? And so in this situation, I actually feel weirdly intrigued because one of my regrets, especially working in tech for so long, was I wish I had some computer engineering or computer science in my background. I wish I had it. Weirdly, without it, I've still managed engineering teams, but talk about imposter syndrome. That's a whole other story. But now I feel like all of these developments in AI, plus the experience I've developed over the years, I actually feel like the gap is closed. Where for anything detailed coding that I need, I have folks on my team or I know how to get it done. But a lot of the stuff that I might want to try, I have tools at my disposal now where before it would have seemed insurmountable. So I do think it creates an opportunity for many of us who didn't grow up as engineers if you're willing to learn.
I mean, you're talking about this, and I'm actually curious to ask this question to you. What do you think if you were talking to a 18-year-old today who is
Mhm.
taking a decision in life to step into the right set of things for the next, let's say, 10 years?
Mhm.
What do you think are the skills that someone should be building right now so that they're
Mhm.
implement 10 years later?
Oh, it's a great question. I wish I knew a simple answer to that. 18 years old, so I assume they're going into their first degree. I would say still a lot of need for deep knowledge in whatever subject they enjoy, because you can have AI and what have you, but the content has to come from somewhere. We talk about synthetic data, all of that stuff, but knowledge and content still needs to come from depth, right? So I would say, rather than something a little vocational, by vocational, or I mean things like programming or accounting or finance, which are very rules based, that perhaps the AI can do. If you have an interest in something deep, go explore that, because you get that opportunity of 4 years, whatever it is, 18 to 22, to be immersed in a particular space. Having said that, I think AI is like the alphabet. Like, you do need to learn what it is and what it means, because it's a part of our lives. Like, on my team now, we have AI team members. I mean, it's weird, but they're there and they're doing important tasks. So they're going to be a part of any workplace these kids go into. So understand what they do, what the limitations are, maybe even use it to make your own life a little bit easier and smoother. I would say beyond that, right, that I don't think any of the biggest leaps you make in life, right, I think are still around building relationships, connecting with people, storytelling. How do you convince someone of an idea? And all these people are like, oh, you can just type something into ChatGPT or your tool of choice. No, there's still a lot of room for original human thought. I think those are the skills that still matter, and I think will always matter. Um, I would also say, go travel, go travel, experience the world. It's a smaller place day by day, and I think it's important. I don't think we've left this, or we've created, or maybe we've been too busy working. I don't know, but the state the world is in, with climate change, with healthcare, there's a lot of really important causes that are going to be very important for the future. And so I wouldn't go too far towards, oh, these are the high money jobs, or this is it. I would go towards still the passion areas, still the things that matter, um, because there's going to be that need for expertise and focus. Even in the scenario that AGI is here and robots are running everything, well, who's going to run the robots? And what are they going to do? So I don't think it changes too much.
Hmm.
Um, and I think I would still index on those skills that are really important at that age, those relationships, those storytelling, those influence skills. Like,
Yeah,
go and work in areas, like do community service, work in areas, travel, understand who you are in this world and what you want to bring,
right.
and learn to learn. I think that's the other thing. They're going to be learning. We're going to be learning at a rate that we've never done, probably much faster than even when we were kids, and
Yeah.
that's hard as we get older. But I think that would be my advice. And I would also say, like, it's all going to work out. So do things the way you want to do it, because today there's more opportunities than ever. Anywhere you are, if you're in India right now, anywhere you are in the world, like, you can connect and do things, and work with people around the world. And so I would say, do things your way, because it's going to work out. There's many more ways for it to go right now than I think the very reductionist thinking we had around, oh, it has to be medicine or engineering, because that felt safe at that time. It came from a good place of, like, these are safe places, you'll make a good living, respect, all of those things, right? Well, there's lots of different ways we can do that today.
So I definitely need to ask you this question, and if I don't, I'm sure a lot of people will be angry with me. Okay, so bear with me for this. So
Okay.
you scored the first rank for the state in the 10th standard here in Karnataka, right? And frankly, if you ask me, we always knew that you would be there. A lot
Oh,
of
I
people that you
didn't.
did
So,
not know about, a lot of people that you did not know thought that you would definitely be there, right? I'm just curious to understand what were you thinking at that point in time?
oh, it was very surreal. I was in Australia when we'd already moved when I got the phone call. It was very surreal. I don't think I fully absorbed it until I came back to India that holidays. And even then, it was all done at that stage, right? So I don't think I fully absorbed it. It definitely felt good in the sense that I was like, oh wow, I guess because I did work very hard, not aiming for it. I just that was what I did. Like I said, I was a nerd. I really liked doing well in school, and so it did feel good that that resulted in something. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, it was very surreal. And by the time I heard about it, I was deep in adjusting to this new school year in Australia, and I was like, yeah, I might have been whatever in India, but like I don't even understand the math here. And I might want to take a photography class over here. So I was in a very different, like, I went from having a very close group of friends to now like nobody knew me, and I was shy, and
Right.
I mean, I was in a very different place. So when that happened, it felt great for a moment, and then I was back to my reality. I was in the worst teenage angst you could imagine, right? Out here, outside my comfort zone. And I also didn't want my dad to feel like I was struggling. So I was trying to like hold it all together. So it was really good. And, you know, my family, friends were all like, oh my God, this is awesome. But for me, it was a little bit like, okay, that's great. Now let me figure out what I'm doing out here, right? So it didn't really sink in. And Yeah, I mean, it was wonderful. It was nice that the hard work was rewarded. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure it opened doors at some stage. You know, maybe it gave me certainly confidence academically because I always had that. But, you know, it was a nice boost to get, particularly at a time where I was struggling otherwise. But had I been in India, I think it would have felt different.
Yeah, very different. I think
Yeah.
you were almost a celebrity and nothing less than that the for all of us, right? So I'm sure it was very different for you in Australia, but in India, I'm sure even today, I can confidently tell you that everybody in our batch remembers you, right?
Oh,
That's
thank you.
because that's because of what you've achieved during that time, right? I don't think before or after there has been anybody from the school who scored the first rank in the state. So it's literally huge. But tell me, how did you go about preparing for it? What was going on in your mind? How did you go about doing it? Because I don't remember your marks, but I do know that you lost absolutely very, very less out of the total that we had for the whole subjects.
I don't think I ever like prepared for it like
Mm.
as a thing because honestly, like I don't think I ever thought, you know, people say, oh, set a goal and you'll reach it. That was not one of my goals. It was a bit abstract for me because I knew that I had heard that the way that the papers were corrected was very arbitrary. Like the Bangalore papers would go somewhere to Dharwad or somewhere else. I knew it was a total crapshoot in terms of what would actually happen. So for me, though, I think it was around seventh grade when I was always a good student, but like first, second, third ish. But around seventh grade when I, for some reason, it clicked for me. I think we had like a semi-public exam in seventh grade.
Yes.
I was also overseas with my dad when those results came, and then I got the first then, and something clicked where I was like, I don't want to let this go. It was just a thing in my head, right? So it was more a self-driven, like I want to, get the most I can get. I don't know what it was, and I really enjoyed studying. What can I tell you? I'm a nerd. So my life was really, I mean, I had these friends, and I would actually, you'll laugh, I would actually play cricket with these boys that lived across my house, and then I would study, and that was what and I did a lot of like debate and elocution and all those things in school.
Yeah.
But I think it was also a really interesting moment where that time in India, if you were really good at school, you got a lot of positive
Right.
reinforcement from teachers, from family, from friends. And so that sort of just kept going,
Right.
and so I don't think it was something that I aimed at, but I was really obsessive about wanting to know it, wanting to get it right, wanting to, if I didn't understand something, I was relentless. I would try and make sure I did. So maybe that's what it was. It was that obsession with wanting to do well, and I think that's actually helped me throughout life, right? Where It would have been easy to give up in certain cases, but I didn't. And I think it's just that internal drive that maybe came from my parents, or maybe was there. I don't know, but I think for me, that was more the process, and then it resulted in this, right? So it wasn't something that I necessarily was like, oh, I need to get this. It was more, I was very, I didn't even see that far. I was more like, in my school, I don't want to give up this thing, right? And then people would tell me about this, and it was still quite abstract for me.
Right.
And I knew I was moving to Australia anyway. So there was a part of me that was like, well, I'm just going to do as well as I can, and then I'm out. And I'm out. Like, I wasn't, we left, like, I think within 20 days of the exam. So it was just a drive to really do well. And I think it gave me a lot of confidence and positive reinforcement every time there was whatever, a test or an exam or every whatever. And that was somehow really important. We all hold on to something in our teen years, right, as we're growing up. And for me, that was that. So I think that was more of the motivation than anything else. The rank was kind of incidental. It was like, oh, okay. I didn't even know that it was, there were other schools like National School. There was all the other schools that typically would get the rank, right? And I would see some of these kids, or I would be at like debate competitions or whatever these competitions were, and with some of the older kids who then ended up getting the rank in their years. And so I would always look at them and be like, wow, like they're really, I mean, they're really something. They were a bit older, and so I never quite connected all of that. I just wanted to do as well as I could. And I do think that's a good thing in life because, once you come out of school, there's always going to be people who are more successful than you, who make more money than you, who have a better job than you. And like I'll give you an example. So Sundar Pichai is my classmate from Wharton. Like, can
Oh,
you imagine? Yeah, I mean, so like if you, so you
talk
have
to us
your own
about
rate. You
it.
I know I would I he was a very large class. It was 800 people. Like, we knew of each other. Super nice guy. Nobody would have, super nice guy. Nobody would have thought he would be CEO of Google at that time if you knew him. Very soft spoken, very sort of focused on his academics and stuff. But again, you got to run your own race. You can't be like, oh, look, he's my classmate. He's the CEO. That's him. And there are so many people, I bet, who have done better than me in various aspects of life, and maybe didn't do as well in school, right? So I think it becomes its own. You sort of run your own race, and you sort of end up where you end up. But as long as you're doing your best,
Yeah.
then you win some and you lose some.
Yeah. It's you said a very, very powerful thing right at the beginning. You said, I can be successful but not happy, right? It's all about finding the right balance of being successful yet happy, right?
Mhm.
I think that's the sweet spot that people should be working towards. Is that fair?
For me, that's true,
Yeah.
and everybody defines that differently, right? So for me, I think I always have liked having agency, control over my life, time freedom. That's becoming more important to me the older I get, but I've always wanted that. So I'll give you an example. When I was in Wharton, summer internships are a big deal, and you have to go and meet these folks in various information sessions to even get an interview, and it's a big mess. And from very early on, I decided that I didn't want to go to banking. I only wanted to do consulting because those are the two options. Everything else was not really a available option to international students. And so that's what I did. So I spent a lot of time, and I got all these consulting, what do you call it, those calls, the interview calls. And then I got calls from a couple of banks, and they really wanted women, and I had an accounting finance background. I had a CA, which they knew what that was. And they were like, why aren't you applying to the banks? And we'll give you an interview slot. And I was like, no, I don't want to do it. And the reason I didn't want to do it is I'd heard about the hours, the 90 plus hours, the whatever. And that just was never for me, right? Some would have said, what are you doing? Like, you can't say no to an interview call with Goldman Sachs because you want, work-life balance, which you don't have anyway in consulting. But it wasn't about that. It was about the kind of work that I wanted to do.
Right.
Um, and the kinds of issues I wanted to look at, and it wasn't about the money, because the money would have been more in banking at the time.
Right.
But I think for me, it's about uh, and what gives you happiness also changes in the course of your life, right? So early on, it was just getting set up and Sachin and I were just like, oh my God, we're actually doing this. We're making it. We didn't get fired, thank God, because we graduated, during the recession. I would pray that we wouldn't get laid off because that can happen to anyone, right? So it was that. Then it was about, okay, you're progressing in your career and you have these kids and you're raising them. And now it's at different stages, right? But for me now, a great day is having time with my kids, having time to go, just the balance, having time to go, do my walks, take care of myself, put in a great day's work, and really, spend time developing some of the talent on my team. Um, and sort of that's what happiness is, or that's what the balance is today, right? So that was very different, even like I would say 10 years ago, it felt very different. There was much more striving and hustle, and now it's a different kind of it's not hustle, it's a little bit more, I don't know, I'm still transitioning to being versus doing, and
Got it.
you're catching me in the middle of that transition, I think.
Got it. Got it. So Priya, switching gears, let's talk about you as a parent.
Mhm.
You've been a parent for the last, I think, 15 years now, 14, 15 years.
Almost 15 on May 15th. So
All right. What's the best part about being a parent?
I mean, it's going to sound very basic, but for me, just the privilege of being a parent. We decided to have kids rather late, and it wasn't an easy process. So for me, even those 3 a.m.s in the morning, kids up or I'm awake, those were like the biggest blessings that I could have asked for, right? So for me, I approached that with a sense of like, oh my God, I can't believe I get to do this, right? So that's huge. I think beyond that, my kids are just so different in personalities, and watching that and sort of being a part of that is just really fun. With my son is the quieter, more artistic, introspective, very deep personality, and my daughter is like a little firecracker. And so you have a very different relationship. And having two, I'm an only child, but having two is just really fun.
Yeah.
To get to almost get to do it twice, right, in very different ways. And I have you have a very unique relationship with these two people that you brought into this world, and they're growing. And I think that part is just amazing to watch that. I think you learn a lot about managing your own anxieties and fears. I think there's nothing scarier in life than being a parent and having your kids go out every day, and you're like, so many things can happen. And so how do you but most things won't happen, but as a parent sometimes that worry can get the better of you. So how do you rein yourself in? And when the that's how I'm growing, I guess I would say, especially as they become teens. My role is changing from every step of the way to now sort of almost a coach and really stepping back. And that's hard some days, but I'm learning how to do that. So that's a life lesson. So I think it's very humbling. It's very to sort of see them look at the world and to see them, how they view things gives me a new perspective, and I really like that about being a parent, I think. So yeah, I guess now I'm getting to enjoy them as they're not mini adults, I wouldn't say, but they have very strong views and personalities. And family trips are very different now than they were 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So they have their plans. They're like, oh, you got to go see this and that. And so it's much more of a partnership, I think, than it was 5 years ago, which I really like. And so for me, whatever jobs, achievements, whatever is fine. But I think my biggest accomplishment will always be my kids. I mean, I think it's the hardest job in the world, and nobody tells you how to do it. And you just hope, again, you show up every day, you have faith in them, even when they're acting up. And also, you make mistakes. I've made mistakes as a parent because it's the first time you're doing some of this stuff. And so, how do you have humility in that process as well? So I think it helps you grow
Yeah.
in ways that is work and other things, I think, are much more linear than parenting.
Yeah. I think there's a rule book for almost everything, but not for parenting, isn't it?
Hmm.
To create your own one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just when you think you have some rules, you don't. There's no rules. You know what I mean? There's no, I
Uh,
keep telling kids, I'm like, just be good to yourself, be good to
yeah,
others, and be happy. Those are the things I need from you, like I want for you. The rest is, it'll all come. Um, and sometimes, especially in the Bay Area, which is a little bit like India when we were grew up, it's, I think we've all like transported ourselves here, so you, all that pressure is live and well with all the tiger parents and what
mhm,
have you. But I think it's important to just give that space and keep some perspective. Because the same thing, like that you were mentioning, that happens in India with millions of kids applying to the IITs. Over here, I think they're like every kid is applying to 25 schools, and some of the kids who are like top of their class or whatever aren't getting into any. This is not a question of supply and demand. There's something horribly wrong with the system, right? So I try to keep the pressure off, but also guide in ways where, I was telling my son, I was like, look, you can go and be part of debate club and this club and that club. But if you really like art and biology, then let's help you do something that's your own. So when it comes time to that, it's going to be a process, that college process. We can't escape it. It's hard to put you in a box,
right.
right? They're going to look, see you for who you are and what you've done. And if you've spent 4 years exploring things that you really enjoyed and learned something, and then that somehow gets you into a college, that's fine. Like I went to this high school that no one's ever heard of in Lithgow in Australia. I went to University of New South Wales, which is a great college for Australia, but in the US, no one's ever heard of it. I'm still here. It's fine. And so, like, I don't think it matters as much as people. It's what's inside you that gets the brands ultimately. And so, I think it's just having a lot of faith in them, in what you're putting into them, and sometimes having it for them, because
Right.
kids get discouraged too. They're grown up in this environment. It's not their fault, where they get everything, and they're getting to that age where they're not getting everything. Right? You try out for a high school sports team, and if you're not the strongest and the fastest, you're not going to get on it. Not like elementary school where everybody got to play and everybody got a medal, right? So they're facing rejections as well. And how do you sort of be that backstop for them? Because confidence is very variable at this age. I think I was more happy than my son when he got into that art and anatomy. I was like, oh my God, he needs something. He needs something that he sought after, that he got into, because all the rest, all the kids get A's and all the kids get this and that. But this was his thing.
Cool. I was about to ask you, what are your dinner table conversations like with your kids? I think you answered some of them. Just as an extension to that, between you and your husband, how do you,
Mhm.
what do you discuss about your parenting philosophy? How do you deal with this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we're luckily we're pretty aligned in how we see things. I think I'm a little bit more anxious than he is. So when something's going on with the kids, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. Or, kids sometimes, especially, and maybe our parents said this of us as well, but sometimes I'm like, kids these days, like, why do we have to teach them the basics about things? Or why are they so down on themselves when they really, no need to know how to take things? I get a little bit like, how's this going to work out? He's a lot more like, no, don't worry, like, it's going to be okay. It's just a natural part of growing up. So I think that's good to have a balance. um, I think we split certain things, and just naturally has been that way. I'm usually the one that's, helping them research various things and bringing them different ideas, half of which they'll throw out. But he's the more reliable on the ground. Not reliable, I'm reliable too, but like on the ground every day. The Is everything going? Are the trains running? Like that's important. So there's a partnership there. Um, I think, what else? We're pretty aligned when it comes to, one thing that I've always appreciated about my husband is there's never been we're very aligned when it comes to the basics, right? The education, the eating well, the, you know, the discipline, what's right, what's not, that stuff, we're very aligned. So there hasn't been, one person saying one thing and the other. That's really good, because I know that that's not always the case. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's I have to tell you, like, I don't know how single parents do it, because it is hard. It is a team sport.
Right.
have so much respect for single parents because there's days when I'm not at my best or he's not at his best, and you need somebody else to just come in and handle. And you said dinner table conversations. It made me laugh because sometimes it's a struggle. I'll be honest, it's a struggle to get them to the dinner table. Like I was having this conversation. I was like, guys, we're not just, this is not a hotel. Like we're not just grabbing our food and sitting with our devices. I need everybody at the table because there's 3 years, 3.5 years before Neil's going to be gone. And they're like, oh, yeah, 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 here we go. And so I find myself corralling. And that's sort of another thing, too. I think, as I think about careers, right? The time, especially in the US, where your kids are with you is so short
Yeah.
that even as I think about opportunities that come up, it's a real calculus for me. I don't want something that's where I'm not going to be home most nights, or that where I'm going to be on the road a lot. I don't want that. And, maybe I don't even know if I'll want that once they're in college, because I think I'll want other things at that point. It'll be time for us to travel and do different things and maybe work outside of tech. But right now, it's all about the time with them. That's the other thing. I think these days, um, I've learned with my kids that being available is important. They may not every day want to come and talk to you about their day, but the days that they do, you better be around because it'll come, right? And so when my son is like, "Oh, I'll go on a walk with you," I know, like he wants to talk about something, right? So just having that predictability, I always had that with my dad, having that predictability, having someone there. So when they need to talk about something, they'll come. And so I think that's really important. I'm also learning. Sometimes I do well, sometimes others, not to solve their problems
Exactly.
or not to give advice, not to give answers,
Just hear them
right?
out.
Yeah, and ask them what do they want to do about it. And they have all the answers, but I'm learning that still, because that natural protective, whatever it is, that you don't want to see them in angst.
Yeah.
Um, but that's what they need, is to solve them those problems themselves. So that's something I'm still learning.
Awesome. So there's this whole debate about, you know, kids not being hungry these days, right?
Mm,
When you go back to the 90s when we were growing up, very clearly the haves were a very small percentage of the whole population. And
mhm.
most of us grew up in an environment where, you know, we did not have a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
Even for kids who came to a really good school like Kumarans, like ours,
yeah,
we had more uh, have-nots than haves, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
hunger was something that came naturally to people like us because
yeah,
we wanted to achieve something. We wanted to get richer or wealthier, whatever you call.
yeah,
Today's kids, with a lot of our generation people doing well, I think food on the table has never been a problem,
yeah.
or having the facilities that were not there for us and much more has not been a problem. So,
Mm,
one, I want to understand, what do you think about this whole thing about today's kids, especially in the cities of India and maybe in the US also, not having hunger to achieve
mm.
your stuff in life? And how do you go about dealing with that?
Yeah, it's something that I think about, and I wonder if it's really their fault, because a lot of these our kids grew up with everything. And
Right.
why wouldn't they, right? Like the whole point of us doing well is to give this to our kids. So it's a very natural point that they end up in. But I think the thing that I get a little bit more worried about sometimes is the hunger. I feel like might come later. So I think I had a very privileged childhood. Like I didn't, but the hunger was still there because it was something intrinsic, right? So I think hunger will come when it's the right thing for them. The part that I worry sometimes these days is I see a little cynicism amongst younger kids, right? Of like, why bother? Look at the world we're in. And they look at examples of leadership ahead of them. Look what's happening, around the world these days. And they're just like, "Ugh, this doesn't matter," or you got, and so that's the part where I find myself thinking, oh, you're too young to be cynical. Like when you have the energy and the opportunity, you've got to do something about it.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's the piece that I worry about. They're growing up in a world where there's more. I think when we grew up, that we had more hunger, there were maybe less opportunity, but it felt safer. It felt like a safer world. You show up, you do the right thing, you go places, and maybe you'll have a couple of detours, but more or less it's fine. Whereas here, like my daughter's, just turned 13, and she talks to me about all this stuff that's going on in the US around Project 2025. I didn't even know, I didn't even know what it was until she told me about it. And I'm like, wow, you're 13 years old and you're worried about these issues about women, and you're barely a woman yourself, and you're worried about how women are viewed and what's happening in the society. And then I thought about it, and all her friends are too. And so I'm like, good God, this was not something we spent time thinking about. And I had to hear her out, because she was like, maybe we should just move back to Australia because at least it's safer there. And I was like, Nina, like the world over is a crazy place right now. So let's talk about how to be safe and blah, blah, blah. And so I think there's a hunger, but there's also a little bit of a cynicism. Um, and I worry about that, because I don't, that's a lot bit of why I want to think about what my next act is. Like, is it just continuing to work at Google and, continuing to be in this space, which is great in so many ways? Or is it something around working for climate change or women's health or education or things that really matter? Because I've been very lucky in my life, and I think I've worked enough and we're okay financially. You can always have more. But what can we do to make this world a place where these kids grow up and feel like it's worth it? Mental health is a big issue, I think, for kids these days, and I don't know why. But it's an issue. Like the number of kids we live in a nice neighborhood, but the number of kids in our neighborhood who are on some kind of mental health medication or whatever, I worry about that for my kids as well. And it's nothing that. And sometimes there were times when I'm like, are we not good parents? Like, what have we done that our kids don't seem to be that motivated? And so I don't have any answers, but I'm definitely concerned that they're growing up in a really uncertain time. And so maybe that's also a little bit of like, why bother? And as you say, right, food on the table is not an issue. There's no existential threats to their,
Exactly.
to anything. Maybe when we grew up, our parents, were dependent on us. So there was this responsibility to grow up, get a good job, bring up the family. All that doesn't exist for them,
Mm.
which, is a little bit like, um, I worry, because a sense of responsibility is a good thing. But
Uh,
if you're not going to do it for yourself, at least do it for your family. Like that was, I'm sure we all had that during our moments, right? But I do think, I think about my own kids and kids that I know, my kids' friends. I do think they have a sense of wanting to do well and make their parents proud. Or there's that's still there. But there's almost, I sense a little bit of, how do I say this, very fragile confidence sometimes. If
yeah,
they don't get it the first time, then
yeah,
it's like, I'll go do something else. And like, we didn't have a lot of other things to try, so we just had to get better at whatever it was, right? And I think the other thing is how we played is very different from how they play. They're on their devices, that's how they meet. um, and I we used to go out and play even if we were really bad at things, and we learned a lot through that.
yeah.
you
Collaboration.
know
Uh,
yeah,
so much.
picking yourself up,
Yeah.
being creative. And so again, every generation is probably our parents said that about us too. You never know. Um, I'm like, what can we do to help this generation? Because I am guilty, like any other parent, of probably over providing and then realizing that, oh, you know, my kids could have a little bit more drive. And then you're like in course correction mode, right? You're like, oh, let's go. And I think they get it. Like at least they're open to the conversation. I think we've done a decent job of saying this bubble that we live in is not real, and this is actually what's real. So we travel a lot, but there's the other side of it, the drive, which is, I worry about this as well. It is so hard, or perceived to be so hard, to get into college, at least in the Bay Area, that some of the kids are like, why bother?
Exactly.
So it's gone the other way too, I feel, in some places where the competitive pressure is so much, especially in certain parts of the world where the kids are like, I don't even know what it's going to take anymore. So
Yeah.
so what do we do? And so I think as parents, trying to shepherd that a little bit, and you know, um, sort of I've said to my kids, look, getting into a college is not it's the first step in a long journey, and it's not the only step.
Yeah.
Like, no one cares that I went to Wharton beyond the first job. And even then, they didn't hire me because I went to Wharton. They were recruiting me because I went to Wharton. Now, whether I got the job or not had nothing to do with Wharton, because everybody there was at Wharton. It had everything to do with my experience, what I brought to that conversation. And so I try to tell my kids, like, life is a series of success is a lot of steps,
Yeah.
and failure is also a lot of steps. So you got to take all of them repeatedly to end up here or there. So don't let one thing or a perceived thing get in the way of your progress. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Great. So, so Priya, if somebody wants to get into Google,
Hmm.
what should they do?
Wow, Google's actually hiring a lot in India right now, so that's obviously good. Google, as the company has grown, I think our strategy has grown as well. It's always been a tech company, and it always will be. So I think there's the basic tech skills, tech focused business skills. Um, I think we have always hired people based on, if it's an advanced hire based on the experience they bring, but if it's a new grad or early career hire, usually based on other signals around achievement and all of that matters. But equally, I think the interview process is very much around collaboration, very much around being able evidence of influencing successfully, whether it's in a work setting or a non-work setting, understanding what drives people,
Right.
because a lot of what we do at Google is not just a job, right? The job I came to do within 6 months looked very, very different. So it's about seeing an opportunity, taking that initiative, and so do you see evidence of that? Um, and I think just a genuine interest in technology, right? So not necessarily deep knowledge, especially early on in careers. And for me, I came in from a non-tech background, right? But enough knowledge to or interest to be able to ask good questions, to at least know things like, what's your favorite Google product and why? How would you change it? Like, having a really nuanced answer to that. Nowadays, with AI and everything going on, what's that likely to mean for Google, for the industry, for the world, really, when you think about it? So I think having that, um, having a good story of accomplishment, collaboration, impact, and then showing that you can actually put those to good use at Google, um, is, like any company, I think, is part of it. It used to be a lot more streamlined before, but I think now it's streamlined, meaning it used to be like 10 interviews over
Yeah, I've
six
heard
months.
about that. I've heard
It
about.
was crazy, and now it's much more streamlined. I think my process was actually pretty streamlined. I think it was like 6 interviews. I was exhausted at the end of that day, and that was it pretty much. But they were very much. It felt like a duel. It felt, I was exhausted. It wasn't sort of easy conversations. They were really putting me through my paces, and I felt mentally, physically drained at the end of it. Right. So you want to be prepared with all your stories, with your why, with good questions.
Mm.
Be ready, not for cases like silly cases like how many marbles in this thing, not like that, but real world problems and how you would approach it. They're looking for how you think, um, and so yeah, that's what I would say.
So, do they still have this 6 rounds of interviews even today?
Even internally, if you, let's say I was going to a different role, I would have 6 or 7 interviews.
And what are
So
the different types of interviews that they do?
typically, the thing that's different, I think, about Google is the hiring manager is doesn't have as much of a voice as you would think. So
Okay.
most of the times, the way it works is the hiring manager and the recruiter will like look at candidates, and then the hiring manager might be like, let me talk to these 2 or 3. They'll have a conversation and be like, yeah, I like these 3, and then they'll go to further interviews.
Right.
And at that point, it's almost out of the hands of the hiring manager,
Uh,
because typically there's a couple of peers, there's a couple of cross-functional partners, there's a couple of people that are completely outside the organization, and different levels, but mostly senior, at least a couple levels more senior. and each of us will have to provide a perspective on, and we test different things. We test like, what they call GCE, which is just like cognitive ability, then leadership, and what's called googliness, which is really around collaboration. The sort of evidence that they've pushed for impact beyond their role. So lots of different things, and everybody sort of takes different roles in the process and goes pretty deep. There's like, I still, even 12 years, 13 years in, I still am not over, like, we're constantly typing in interviews, taking detailed notes on everything. Yeah, so it's a pretty drawn out process, and then we all sit together and discuss. And there have been many situations where hiring managers have wanted a particular candidate, or they had a preference, but the panel came out somewhere else. And then all of that gets into a written recommendation, goes up to a hiring committee that's separate from all of this, that looks at, for example, if the person's an engineer, they would look at this candidate, they've not been part of any interviews, and they look at all the write-up in and sort of say, okay, what level should this person be? And because there's different levels. And that's how it works. So it's a very time-consuming, collaborative process that can take a while. And nowadays, we're not hiring as fast as we used to before. But still, in India, there's a lot of hiring at this point. But I'd say patience and just kind of trying to enjoy the process as you go through it, and just treating it as a two-way conversation and not getting too worked up about it. For technical roles, there's obviously a coding interview as well. So folks need to be ready for that.
Got it. Got it. So coming to India, where does Google go to hire the best of people? What sort of institutes? Is it only engineering colleges, or do they also source from other places?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's obviously the IITs, BITS, Pilani, all those. There's IIMs, the MBA schools, ISB. There's even some of the more regional engineering colleges. Some of our hires have worked already in the US and are coming back. So they might be, folks who came here for grad school and have worked here for a little bit and going back. We certainly have a lot of that right now. So it's really a mix, I think. And they tend to also hire folks who are a little bit into their careers. So there is, campus hiring, but there's also a lot more experienced hiring in India, because in India we needed to quickly come in and establish leadership layers and then build the teams around them. So there is campus hiring, but there's a lot of mid-career, advanced career hiring as well.
Got it. Got it. Got it. I'm again tempted to ask this question. Going back to school,
Hmm.
who are your favorite teachers?
Oh my gosh, who are my teachers? I liked them all. I loved Deepa sister. I loved Kokila sister. Our drawing teacher Ambika sister. I loved our Sanskrit teacher Mangala sister.
Yeah.
I had a really great experience, I think. I loved our science teachers, like we had, so yeah, I had a really good experience.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's try and wrap it up in the next
Mhm.
maybe 5 to 7 minutes. Before I get there, I want to ask you uh, a quick fire round of questions, right?
Okay. All
So
right.
the first one is, what's the worst career advice that you've ever received?
Oh, worst career advice I've ever received. That's a good one. Oh yeah. I think just keep your head down and keep working. That's the worst advice ever. Because I just don't think careers work like that. You've got to be aware. You got to understand what's happening around you. Even if your job is all consuming, you've got to keep an eye on what else is happening around. So I think that's pretty bad advice.
Got it. Got it. One skill that changed everything for you.
Storytelling, learning how to go from analyst to advisor and influence people, I think was the biggest sort of unlock for me. And that's really all Bain. And I'm so glad I got that experience with them.
Got it. What's that career hack that saved your life?
That saved my life. I don't know. No. I think maybe not save my life, but learning to To stay calm under pressure. I remember a couple of situations in consulting. There was a very, very mercurial CEO. He would yell and scream at others, and I was quite intimidated by it. And I remember one of the partners. There was a break, and we went to the restroom, and she was like, "You're going to present this next thing," and I was like, I almost could have like vanished into thin air if I could. She probably saw the panic on my face, and she was like, "Look, nobody knows this better than you. This piece of work that you're about to present, and whatever he's doing or saying, that's on him. Like, you are just going to show up and do this, and I have your back. So just do this. Nobody knows this work better than you." And I think that was actually a really important moment for me, because I was the most junior person in the room, and I was seeing all this behavior, and I was just not, if I could have run out of there, I would have. And so in that moment, her pulling me aside and saying, "I have you, like, you're going to do this. It's going to be good for you, even if you don't like it," was actually really terrifying at first. But then it actually felt like she could have just done it herself. But she took a chance and supported me to do it. And it sort of shaped how I think about folks on my team, and giving them the opportunity when sometimes it's easier not to.
Awesome. Awesome. And my final one. What
Mhm.
is your biggest professional what the hell moment?
Biggest professional what the hell moment. I think it was actually this same situation, because we were at this client, and we would catch a flight at 5:30 a.m. from Boston for 11 a.m. meeting to Cincinnati, and then 11 a.m. and the meetings would not happen until 11 p.m. And then the CEO would proceed to have everyone on speed dial, because if he ever saw something or if he heard something from us that he didn't quite like, he would call this person up and yell and scream at them. And that was one of the moments when I was like, I don't want to do this job anymore. Like, it's not what we show up every day. We show up every day to transform businesses, to help executive teams, to help businesses do better. And in this case, we were having a miserable time, and so was everyone around him. And it just felt like this was a project that was, we were getting paid and we were doing it, but it was awful. Right. So that was the moment when I started to be like, I don't want this life. I was before we had kids, but I started to be like, this is not fun anymore. There's nothing to learn from this day other than extreme patience. And so there's a lot to learn not to do. And that was the moment where I was like, no, this is not a good
Yeah.
situation to be in.
Yeah, I was about to say you either learn what to do or how to do, or you learn what
What
not, right? So,
Agreed. Agreed. It was just, I think this day was like months. We were talking 9 months of this nonsense, right? So I was at the end of my tether, where I was like, that's it. I've had it. I don't think I've learned enough what not to do. I don't need to see it every day. I
yeah,
need to get out, was my response at that point.
cool, cool. So, Priya, uh, we've come to the end of this. I know it's been a long, long conversation. It's pretty late for you. Uh, Firstly, thank you so much for taking our time.
Of
And
course. Thank you.
I really loved speaking to you. I think there were lots of uh, very, very powerful nuggets that you gave to me and to our listeners. I'm sure they're going to love it. But before closing, I just want to ask you a couple of closing questions. You know,
Mhm.
firstly, did you enjoy this conversation?
I loved it. It was great. We should have talked much sooner. So thank you.
Yeah, better late than never, right?
That's right.
So awesome. So that's number one. Second, a lot of my audience are parents of young adults or young adults themselves.
Mhm.
What would be your unfiltered advice to this audience?
I would say have faith, um, learn a lot, and don't be afraid to try things.
Super. My last question, how can my listeners connect with you?
I think LinkedIn is the best way to go. Just,
LinkedIn?
you can find me Priya Anant on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn.
Cool. So what I'll do is to put your LinkedIn, URL there, and people
Yeah.
can connect with you.
Thank
Cool.
you. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Cool. Is there anything that you want to say before we close?
No, I really appreciate what you're doing, and I can't wait to. I listened to your other two podcasts, so I can't wait to listen to more. So good luck with your endeavor, and let me know how I can help.
Thank you so much, Priya. I'll keep in touch and
Please do.
sure we can do a lot of things together.
I
All
would love
right.
that.
Good
We'll
night.
talk
And
soon.
thank you so much once again.
And
Lovely.
enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Take care. Bye.
Thank you so much. Take care,
Thank
Priya.
you.
Bye bye.